I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar, Securing Your Future, Financial Planning, Housing, and Long-Term Care as You Age. So, one of the biggest issues that many of us will face as we age is healthcare and the potential for needing long term care services. We'll likely have to address questions like what sorts of services might we or a loved one need? Where will we get those services? How much will they cost? These, again, are questions that we're likely going to face. Another big issue that we'll probably face as we age is housing. And so, although housing is a deeply personal decision that each of us will make, our health care and our potential need for long term care services often will dictate where we live as we age. So, having a clear understanding of the options available and planning for your desired option now is going to help to ensure that you're living happily the way that you want to live, where you want to live into the future. We're going to be talking in great detail about this today. We're going to be diving into the intersection between long term care, needing long term care services, and housing. And what are our options if we, in fact, need long term care or we're able to live more independently. So, to start things off, I want to introduce myself and the other participants in our webinar today. My name is Kelly Keydel. I'm a wealth manager with Wealthspire Advisors here in Seattle. I work with my clients, helping them with comprehensive financial planning and investment management, and helping them to navigate life transitions or life events, which might include a major healthcare event, a move in housing, or something different like sale of a property or losing a loved one. So, those are all areas that I help my clients navigate these various life events and ultimately to make really good, sound financial decisions for themselves and their families. I'm super excited to be joined by two experts in the area of aging and longevity. First, I have Mollie Huppert that I'd like to introduce. Mollie is a real estate broker with Windermere Real Estate. So she knows housing and all things housing. And one area that she specializes in is senior housing. So she has her senior real estate housing designation and is again an expert in this area. So she's going to share a lot of information about aging in place and or living independently as we age. I'm also excited to introduce Sarah Cave. And Sarah is going to be talking not only about long term care, what is long term care, what services fall under the long term care umbrella, what do they cost. So she's going to do a great overview around that. But she's also going to talk about housing options if we have greater care needs. So we've got two experts again that are joining us, and I'm really excited about all the information that we're going to be sharing. Now, one big housekeeping item before we kick things off. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So we've reserved some time for your questions. You'll notice at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button. So just go ahead and any question that you may have that isn't answered throughout the presentation, add it in that Q&A button or feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We'll be monitoring that. And again, we have time reserved at the end of the presentation to address those questions. All right, let's get things started. And I would like to kick things off. You're going to hear the word planning throughout the presentation. That's really fundamental. But to set the foundation even more around how to prepare financially for your housing and your long term care needs, I want to share some information just again to give you a good foundation. And this information, it may be familiar to you. You've probably heard, some or all of this before, but I think it's important to share this. One is around longevity. And I think that we're all aware of the fact that we are living longer lives here in the US. This slide that you'll see is a little bit busy, but the trend is pretty clear that if we go back a couple of decades and then move forward a couple of decades, we're in fact living longer lives. And in fact, I think what's noteworthy is as we move forward, and look at the aging population, specifically those aged 85 and older, they are a growing population. And again, we expect that trend to continue. Now, coupled with not only living longer is the fact that as we age, we're likely going to need some help with regard to our health care in the form of long term care services. And statistically, over 50% of us age 65 and older will need some form of long term care service provided. And those long term care services will likely average about 3 years. So, living longer, likely to need long term care services, and they will average again about 3 years or thereabouts. Now, another piece to all of this is the cost. And so this again is a little bit hard to read some of the words on this particular slide, but costs, as I think we all know, for healthcare in general are growing, and long-term care as a subset of healthcare is no different. So long-term care service costs are growing, and Sarah's going to dive into this in greater detail. But I think there's often a misperception that Medicare covers a lot of the long-term care costs that one might experience. That is not the case. In fact, most of those long-term care costs are covered either through Medicaid or out of pocket. So we are either paying for those costs ourselves, or again, they're paid through Medicaid. And Sarah will cover that a little bit more so you'll have a better understanding. Again, all of these are really important for us to know and to understand and to plan for. If we're not planning for the long term care needs that we or a loved one may have, and also our housing around that, we're not necessarily going to be able to live the way that we want to or in the environment that we want to as we age. Now, it's true that I think for a lot of us, we would prefer to age in place. We want to remain in our own home and or live independently. And so I'm going to turn it over to Molly because she really has a lot of expertise in this area. She's going to talk about whether or not you want to live independently in a community of some sort or in your home, what those options are, and other considerations around that. So, with that, Molly, will you take it from here?
Thanks, Kelly. Hey, everyone. I'm Mollie Huppert with Windermere. And as Kelly mentioned, I help clients with residential real estate, including buying and selling primary residence, investment property, second homes. And I really enjoy working with seniors. I'm going to be talking to you today about housing considerations and options if you're thinking about aging in place or making a move to age in place more easily in the future. There are many housing related decisions that we make over our lifetimes. And as we get older, there are some specific considerations and decisions that have to be made, whether it's for ourselves or for loved ones that we're helping out. There's no one size fits all approach, there's no silver bullet, and sometimes life hands us unexpected surprises that we have to deal with. The best approach is to do some upfront planning so that an unexpected situation does not turn into a crisis. Let's talk about aging in place. Multiple studies have shown that approximately 90% of seniors intend to remain in their current homes for the next 5 to 10 years. And this is because they like their home and they want to be near friends and family. And in fact, these numbers seem to play out pretty accurately. Over 93% of older adults living in are today are living in single family homes, condos, and apartments. Now, this is a great option if your home's layout and size are good for living in or for aging in place. Here in Seattle, where we're located, we have a lot of older multi-story homes. And even some homes that have all the living space on the main floor often have laundry or other key functions on different floors. Addressing accessibility issues inside and out is critical for aging in place. Smart home and emergency response systems can be added to extend the length of time seniors can live in their home. So that can be a helpful added component as well. Now, financially, if an aging homeowner wants to stay in their home and they have significant equity, they may consider a reverse mortgage to help finance any required updates and even to cover the cost of in home care if other funds aren't readily available. A third option that helps people stay in their homes and communities is to get a housemate. A woman I met recently who runs a virtual village organization, I'm going to talk about those in a minute. She lives with a roommate as a roommate with an older retired person. This benefits both of them as it makes housing more affordable and also provides social interactions, the safety, security, convenience of not living alone, and they share household chores and errands. How great is that? Or maybe you want to stay in your current location, but your home just can't easily be updated for aging in place, or maybe it's too big and you want something a little smaller. A new statewide law in Washington was recently passed that allows increased density on residential lots in jurisdictions and jurisdictions like Seattle and Kirkland have already implemented the code changes to allow for this. And we see this all over Seattle with multiple homes, up to 3 homes on one lot. So that's what's going on there. And other cities are working on the code changes as well to allow that. So leveraging the equity in your current home can help finance this approach. And you even have the option of selling off your current home and or retaining it and renting it out. It just all depends on your current financial situation. For the city of Seattle, there are several architects that have worked with the city to develop pre-approved plans that can make the process go a lot faster. And then other companies have all-inclusive offerings that include design, permitting, construction of standard plans, and that can provide a really cost-effective and reliable way to build a backyard cottage. This really takes the concept of the mother-in-law unit to a whole new level. So the home and its configuration are just one aspect of aging in place. Imagine that you could prolong the length of time that you could stay in your home because you had help with home maintenance, with pet care, repairs, meal preparation, or errands. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you were also part of a community that planned and supported outings to museums and shows, shared meals, happy hours, book discussions, and other activities? This membership-based concept called virtual villages was started in Boston in 2001 by a group of seniors looking for ways to stay connected to their community and to remain independent as long as possible. Today, there are over 400 of these villages, across the US. And here in the Seattle area, there are about a dozen of them. All right, but let's say that you don't live in that cute yellow one-story bungalow. You're still living in that 4,000 square foot, 3-story family home that you raise your 7 kids in, and you're ready for something that will better support aging in place. Let's talk about downsizing. Okay, does anyone's garage look like this one? All right, maybe it's not quite this bad, and no judgment if it is, but if you've lived in your home for any significant amount of time, chances are you've accumulated a few things that you may not need if you're moving to a smaller home. If you think that moving out of your current home is high likelihood at some point, you cannot start the planning and the preparations early enough. Even when living in a home for just a few years, the stuff just seems to pile up. And it's always going to take longer than you think it will to sort it, give it away, throw it away, take it to Goodwill, recycle it, and pack it, the remainders. Now, I know the decluttering process can feel overwhelming, especially if you're solo or if you've been living in your home for many years. But don't worry, there are a lot of resources out there who can assist with planning and executing move activities. And a good realtor will have a list of companies that provide this type of support. You can outsource the whole thing, you can tackle it on your own, or somewhere in between. And even if you've decided that you're staying in your current home, decluttering and removing obstacles will help you live more safely as you age. So it's always a good idea. All right, that was a lot of information. So I'm just going to recap the downsizing best practices. So start early, the earlier the better. Get help, friends, family, hire a professional. I know, it might be difficult to ask for help, but I know that friends and family are always willing to help if you cannot afford to hire a professional. And if you hire a professional, you can go full service. They have white glove service or, just a little help here and there, a la carte as well. Setting deadlines can really help, but be realistic with those deadlines. And I know purging can be emotionally difficult. You've collected many items with nice memories over the years. So take time to honor your memories and sit with those items. Take photos. Don't put them in photo albums. Just take digital photos to take with you and really take the time to honor that. And lastly, if you can, identify where you're going to move to and move first, taking only the things that you need with you to furnish your home and decorate your home and the things that you need, and then go back and tackle the rest of the items that are in the home before you sell it. All right, once you've determined that you're going to sell, in order to optimize value and make it as easy as possible for prospective buyers to tour your home, my recommended approach is to move out. Get a home inspection, work with your realtor to figure out what items on that inspection need to get addressed before you sell it, and then also talk through any updates that are going to make the home more appealing to the broadest array of buyers. Many real estate companies have a home ready loan that you can tap into upfront, and this is paid back with the proceeds at the sale, which is really nice if you don't have funds readily available. And then most realtors, including myself, I have tons of resources for various home maintenance, repair, and upgrade projects if needed. Now, of course, a home can always be sold as is or somewhere in between as is and tip top shape, but setting expectations on price is critical. Because if you don't fix it up and it's not, the curb appeal isn't there and it's not move-in ready, it's just not going to sell as quickly or for as much money as if you get it really into great shape. So the home shown here was owned by a couple who decided to retire to the Olympic Peninsula. While the home did have a main floor bedroom and full bathroom, the primary suite was on the second floor of the home and the laundry was in the basement. They wanted single floor living in a new setting outside of Seattle. Luckily, the husband was a former contractor and the home was in pretty good shape, but they did do some repairs up front and got it really, you know, buyer ready. And then purged, packed, moved out. We had the home cleaned and staged, and it sold in 6 days earlier this year for well above list price. Okay, yet another cute little yellow house. I seem to have a thing for yellow houses, don't I? All right, so you've decided to downsize, but where will you go? Downsizing comes in a wide range of flavors. This can look like a cute single family, one-story home down the street from your current home or in a nearby neighborhood so you can stay close to family and friends. Or maybe it's moving to be closer to family and friends in another state or another area. Or maybe it's a condo. Condos are usually more affordable than single family homes. The maintenance, the hands-on maintenance is decreased with condos, and they usually provide solid accessibility with elevators and one-story living. But condos do come with their own unique set of considerations. One thing to look into is what shape the commonly maintained elements, such as the siding, the roof, the balconies, the windows, what shape those things are in. You'll want to ensure that the HOA has sufficient reserves to maintain the building in good shape. Details like this can be gleaned from the resale certificate, which is available during the purchase process, and your realtor can help with all of that. You do not want a financial surprise in the form of a special assessment for all new windows while you're living on a fixed income. Last consideration that I'll mention for condos is there's not necessarily a built-in sense of community. A friend's parents have built a strong community in their Tucson home where they lived nearly full-time for the past 20 years. In their late 70s, they decide to move to Seattle and to downsize and be closer to family. Now, while their condo has lovely views and is close to restaurants and amenities and retail, there's just no sense of built-in communities. And many of the owners actually are absentee owners. Of course, this can be engineered by residents themselves, alerting their friends when new listings come on in their building. And there's a condo community on Capitol Hill that I know of where this occurs with the older residents on a regular basis. Now, if you're looking for something with built-in community that provides social and fitness activities, a good option could be a senior co-op. These typically include maintenance inside and out, and sometimes even down to the appliances. In our area, there is one senior co-op in Bellevue. But if you're tired of our temperate climate and are looking for something a little more extreme, you can always move to Iowa or Minnesota. There are literally hundreds of them there. And if affordability is a factor, they're definitely more affordable in those areas. Or it could be moving to a co-housing community with its focus on social connections like shared meals, work parties, collaborative decision making. These communities are typically multi-generational, and this particular co-housing community shown here on the upper left is Jackson Place in Seattle. It has 40 adults and 20 children living there, ranging in age from babies to people in their 80s. The ownership structure is individually owned condos, and there's an abundance of common space and amenities. Now, if living light on the earth, organic gardening, and community connections are appealing, an intentional community such as Grow on Bainbridge Island, which is in the lower right, might be more your style. Grow welcomes residents of all ages with green building practices, age-in-place accommodations. And these homes are individually owned as well, and their last phase is actually under construction right now. The last category I'm going to talk about is the active adult 55 plus community. The one shown here is Trilogy at Redmond Ridge, and it's a community of single family homes on the east side. And if you live there, you get access to this gorgeous clubhouse and all sorts of fun social activities, exercise classes, planned events. Now, because this is an established community, the only homes available are going to be resales, and those are typically found on the local multiple listing service that real estate agents have access to, or you can find them also on websites like Zillow and Redfin. I couldn't resist showing one more option for those considering the active adult model, just because the setting is so beautiful. Regency at 10 Trails down in Black Diamond is a brand new 55 plus community with a range of one-story homes, a clubhouse, which you can see in the picture here, and activities and amenities. While it's a little further outside our metro area, who could resist this fantastic view of Mount Rainier? So I hope this gives you a good sense of the various options and different opportunities for aging in place or making a move to better set yourself up to age in place and how it might play out and who can help. And now I'll turn it back over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Molly. That was a fantastic overview. So many options for those that want to either remain in their own home or at least be independent. So, from co housing, condominiums, 55 plus retirement communities. So, lots of different options to consider, which is so great to learn about. However, again, we know that this isn't going to be possible, that living independently won't be possible for everyone or even desirable. So, depending on healthcare needs, long term care needs, or a desire for more services, perhaps, or even just a different social environment, again, these independent living situations may not be the ideal for everyone. So I want to turn this now over to Sarah. Sarah Cave again. She owns and operates Always Best Care Senior Services here in Seattle. And she's going to talk a little bit about long term care. So, give us a general understanding of long term care and costs, services, et cetera. But also, what are some of the living arrangements where someone who, either an individual or a loved one of theirs, isn't able to live as independently as what Molly described. So, Sarah, will you go ahead and address some of those issues?
I sure will. Thanks, Kelly. So, before we dive into long term care, I'd like to tell you a story about my mother, who is my inspiration. And she is affectionately known as Maggie Mom. She was also pictured in the previous slide with one of her always best care caregivers at Joa. In 2021, my mom, a retired nurse executive, was 76 going on 60, volunteering, fishing all over the world, riding her Peloton, and taking my 16-year-old daughter on shopping sprees. When she had a massive stroke that left her entirely paralyzed on one side of her body. She had to have half of her skull removed to relieve the swelling, receive nutrition through a feeding tube, and spend 6 weeks at Harborview, followed by 6 months at Klein Gallen Skilled Nursing and Rehab Center. Not only was this life changing, but neither my mom nor my stepdad, Bob, had long term care insurance, nor had they worked with someone like Kelly to self insure for long term care. Thankfully, they had investments and assets, and they also were fortunate enough to have me to help navigate the complexities of their journey, as well as Molly to sell their condo. And she did that despite the fact that the interest rates rose just a day before it went on the market. So, although I have had a ton of experience in healthcare, worked in healthcare for more than 20 years, this experience really gave me a crash course in geriatric care management and long term care. And after getting my mom and Bob settled into an assisted living community in April 2022, in July of that year, I launched Always Best Care Seattle, an in home care and assisted living guidance and placement agency that is part of a national franchise, but independently owned and operated by an amazing team of talented staff and caregivers. So let's turn to long term care. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, long term care includes a broad range of health, personal care, and supportive services that meet the needs of older people and other adults whose capacity for self care is limited because of chronic illness, injury, physical, cognitive, or mental disability, or other health-related conditions. If this sounds like an earful, it's because long-term care encompasses a lot. This graph compares our state's monthly median costs of 3 types of long-term care in 3 settings: at home, in an assisted living community, and in a nursing home. The reason I've broken out the assisted living community costs is that the $6,000 does not include care costs, which are calculated separately based on a care assessment, and which I've attempted to determine the median here in our region with the 2,500. The key takeaway, it's expensive. It's important to note that these are statewide figures from 2021, and the actual costs can exceed $20,000 a month, which they well exceed for my mom. And the annual cost for these services will vary, but range from about $50,000 a year to up to $250,000 a year. Also, when you apply current Seattle rates to the in-home care figure in this graph, this amounts to only 5 hours of care daily. And the assisted living communities represented here include those that offer what's called a Medicaid spend down. To explain the term Medicaid spend down, I'd like to return to the slide that Kelly presented earlier. As Kelly explained, Medicaid is the biggest payer of long-term care. Why is this when so many Americans are not on Medicaid when they retire? In large part, it's due to the common belief that Medicare will cover our healthcare costs as we age. And while Medicare and supplemental Medicare plans do pay for hospital and clinic-based care, they generally don't cover non-medical in-home care or assisted living. So what happens is that people find themselves in the position of spending down to Medicaid eligibility. And to be eligible for Medicaid, an individual must not have more than $2,000 in remaining assets or income. So you can see that while Medicaid is a great safety net, it also limits your options. And this is why it's so important to plan ahead rather than wait until there's a significant health decline or catastrophic event to start exploring options for your future. One of the kind of common misconceptions is that home health care is just one thing. And in fact, it really comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and I want to demystify this a little bit for you. So long-term care, it's multifaceted and complex, and I'd like to just run through 3 types of care that individuals can receive at home: non-medical in-home care, home health, and hospice. So what is in-home care? You can think of in-home care as long-term continuous care that you receive in your home. And it's really centered around providing assistance with the activities of daily living, also known as ADLs. While home health is a little bit more episodic or intermittent care based on clinical needs. And you can think of this as the nursing care that someone may need to have in their own home, as well as things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and wound care. And finally, hospice is end-of-life care, which you can receive in your home or in an assisted living community or adult family home. So who decides about home health care? Well, with regard to non-medical in-home care, individuals and families decide. For home health and hospice, you must have a provider's referral to receive those services in your home. And there is also the understanding and stipulation that you are, in fact, homebound. And in the case of hospice, that you have a prognosis of 6 months or less in order to qualify. Who provides these services? For non-medical in-home care, this is provided by staff like the ones who staff our agency, These are certified home care aides or certified nurse assistants, and they're highly trained caregivers, and most of them, if they're working for an agency like ours, are insured by their home care agency. Home health is provided generally by registered nurses, and then physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and then there's also something called a home health aide, which is a little bit different than the folks who are providing the non-medical in-home care because they have some additional skills. And finally, with hospice, somewhat similar to home health, except the folks that are listed here are really highly trained and have deep experience working with folks at the end of life. And social workers are often in the mix for hospice as well, because there's a lot to think through. Finally, who pays? So we've talked a bit about this already. And so the key thing that I just want to point out here is that the key difference with who pays for in-home care is that Medicaid and individuals and families are the top two categories of who pays. And the great news is that if you're a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran, there's also some really tremendous benefits available. And then you'll see with home health and hospice, those are generally approved by Medicare and or Medicaid or the VA. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit and focus on sort of my piece of this and where my expertise comes in. So I want to start with a little pop quiz, and please use the Q&A to notate your answers. And so the question is, which of the following activities is not a non-medical in-home care service? Is it A, medication administration, B, light housekeeping, C, meal preparation, D, assistance with bathing, or E, transportation? So what are you seeing in the Q&A, Kelly?
Some shy audience members. I don't see a lot of responses yet. Oh, there we go. E. Someone's
Okay, come on. This
chosen
is the audience
transportation.
participation time. Do we have only one answer?
Two transportations.
Okay. All right. Well, in fact, it's medication administration. So transportation is something that our caregivers regularly do with our clients, and they take them to medical appointments, excursions, to get their hair done, errands, grocery shopping, you name it. And so the correct answer is A. Home care aides who are providing one-on-one care in people's homes can provide medication reminders and assistance, but they may not administer medication without additional training and supervision by a nurse. Okay, so what is in-home care all about then? Really, the term encompasses two big parts: personal care and companion care. And I'm going to sort of lump those together and share with you that this really comprises help with daily activities such as dressing and bathing, assistance with safely managing tasks around the house, transportation to medical appointments, companionship, errands and excursions, as well as meal preparation and light housekeeping. And this is not really an exhaustive list. There's all sorts of different creative engagement and or additional personal care tasks that an in-home caregiver can provide. So shifting gears a little bit, when home is no longer an option, there really are a variety of alternative supportive living options for seniors. And I want to run through a few of them, including continuing care retirement communities. This photograph here is of my team at a gala that was raising money for the Benevolent Care Fund at Covenant Shores Living, which is a local CCRC in our area. I'm also going to talk a little bit about assisted living communities and adult family homes. So continuing care retirement communities, or CCRCs, you can really think of these as a one-stop shop. Generally speaking, you buy in to independent living. So you make a considerable uh, uh, down payment, if you will, and you move into an independent living apartment. And they come in a lot of different varieties. And then after being in independent living for a while, you may get to a fork in the road where you either require to have in-home care in your independent living unit, or you can graduate to an assisted living or memory care apartment, generally in the same complex, sometimes in the same building, but on a different floor. And the other thing that's unique about CCRCs is that they also have a skilled nursing and rehab center on site on the same campus. And that can be really nice as people are starting to sort of get into these back and forth of maybe needing to be hospitalized and then needing some subacute care, and they can do that sort of back in their same community and then transition back into assisted living. This is a great option when people are sort of in earlier retirement or mid-retirement, meaning they're anticipating living for a long time and being able to really enjoy the independent living and a lot of the amenities that Mollie spoke about in some of the examples she shared. And it's also a really good option for couples where one partner is significantly more independent and the other perhaps has some considerable health challenges that you're anticipating might become a bigger issue down the road. Couple of caveats here. In some cases, the buy-in fee is not fully refundable. In fact, in most cases, usually it's about 80% that goes back into your estate or that you get back when you vacate your independent living unit. And it's important to be prepared to move from independent living to assisted living or memory care as you age. It's not necessarily a must, but the folks in CCRCs rather are really wanting to make sure that the people who are living in independent living are equipped to live very independently. And if they're starting to see some things that are signs of health failing, then they really want to make sure that those residents are either getting in-home care or transitioning to another part of the CCRC. Assisted living communities is also another good option. And how this works is that rather than a buy-in, there is a one-time non-refundable community fee. Typically, the price tag for the community fee is considerably less than the buy-in fee, sometimes only a fraction. And then you pay monthly rent, and the rent is all inclusive of a whole bunch of stuff that I'll share in a moment. And then the care is assessed separately, and that's what in that bar graph, what I was trying to communicate there. So what is included? This is not a complete list, but you can see that there's quite a lot included. So when you're considering moving to an assisted living community, a lot of times people go, oh, that's just way too expensive. But it's really important to sort of add up what are the expenses that you currently have at home. Are you paying a housekeeper? Are you paying a gardener? How much are you paying in groceries? All of those kinds of things are really important because those are all included in your rent in an assisted living community. So you have a 24-hour emergency call system. You have 24/7 caregivers. There's on-site nursing. Usually a pretty broad array of life enrichment programs and opportunities for socialization. Utilities are included, meals, as I mentioned, and transportation to medical appointments is usually part of the deal. The last category that I wanted to share a little bit about is adult family homes. And like assisted living communities, there's a one-time move-in fee, generally even less than the community fee, considerably less. It's more of a non-refundable deposit, if you will. And then you pay rent and care combined in one payment. And that includes not only your room and board, but also help with those activities of daily living that we discussed, as well as some socialization opportunities. So, what's the difference? So, these homes are licensed to care for 6 to 8 residents instead of a whole building full of folks. And there are 1 to 2 care staff for every 6 residents. So a much greater proportion and kind of eyes on folks more frequently, and that's largely because you see people in these adult family homes who are maybe higher acuity or just needing a little bit more attention, but perhaps can't afford one-on-one care. And they range from luxurious homes with water views to much more modest settings. I've toured clients at a whole bunch of different adult family homes, and they're sometimes surprised to see the broad array. And really, this, just as with assisted living, the setting is independent of the level of care. Just because it's a big fancy place doesn't necessarily mean it's the highest quality care, and the reverse can be also the case. And finally, as I mentioned, actually, the one thing I didn't mention here is that they're typically owned and operated by nurses. And so you get that nursing supervision, and the care staff all have the nurse delegation, so they can provide a little bit broader scope of services. So I hope that this has given you a high level understanding of long-term care and some of the options that exist for aging in place. It can be daunting to navigate, and that's why I felt compelled to transition to senior services after my experience with Maggie Mom. And I'd really welcome the opportunity to connect offline with any of you who could use some additional guidance. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly to share some financial planning insights and wrap things up for us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And you're right. That was a really great overview, not only of giving us a good understanding of long-term care and everything that falls under that umbrella, from services to costs, as well as by extension to housing options, to, where one might receive that care as they age. So excellent overview, and putting that together with Mollie's overview in terms of living more independently, aging in place in your own home, or an independent community of some sort. This just gives us a lot of great things to consider. And pardon me, I'll just share that my role as a financial advisor is really to provide clarity on what's possible from a financial standpoint. So it's looking at, first of all, what are your goals? So in working with my clients, it's identifying what are your goals and what do you desire for yourself and your loved ones as you age. How do you want to be cared for? Where do you want to live? And then looking at what's, again, financially feasible based on the resources that you have. Although this graphic that you see is a busy slide, pretty colors, it's a wonderful output, and it's a way for us to illustrate different scenarios. So whether it be, what happens if I want to live in a continuous care retirement community and I have a large upfront fee that I need to pay, what will that look like in terms of the sustainability of my resources over time? Or alternatively, if I want to stay in my home and perhaps have care brought in, what would that look like? So that's super important in terms of really, understanding what's sustainable in terms of our resources and getting our arms around that now. And that's something that I work very closely with my clients to understand, navigate, and then help them to be armed with just really great information as they're making those important decisions in their lives. I think you've heard us mention the word planning a number of times. I know all three of us have, and that's because that really is one of the critical components. And in fact, when we talk about key takeaways for the presentation, that we are just wrapping up here, one of them is to plan. It's never too early. It's never too late to plan. So we encourage you, if you haven't already, started planning for your long-term care needs or someone you love, do that now, and also, housing considerations around that. So planning is a big key component. Another takeaway that we want to leave you with is to really understand what's within your control and not within your control. Certainly, we don't control our genetics and our DNA. That's something we're born with. But we can choose the foods we eat, how much we exercise, our lifestyle. So we do have choice over that. Similarly, we don't control the markets, the financial markets. We don't have control over inflation. What we can control is how much we save, how much we spend, how much we spend toward planning, or time wise spend on planning for our future. So again, recognizing what we do and do not control, and really optimizing for those things that we do have control over. And lastly, the other key takeaway we'd like to leave you with is assembling your team of experts. Your team is important, and your team will likely include someone like me, a financial advisor, someone like Molly, a senior housing expert, or more just her general real estate expertise, or Sarah, who has tremendous expertise in long-term care services, and again, sort of the options around obtaining those care services. So we are three potential team members, but we also know that there are other team members that are equally important. So tax professionals, as an example, or attorneys, elder law attorneys. We have estate attorneys. So it's just critical that you have your team put together and that you do that sooner versus later. We don't want to be in a crisis when we're making decisions and having to put together a team who doesn't know us or necessarily our situation or our desires. We want that in place beforehand. So, those are the key takeaways that we want to leave you with. And we'd love to entertain any questions that we weren't able to answer during our webinar. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to look at our Q&A and just see if there's any questions. I'm not seeing anything immediately that wasn't answered. I know someone asked about obtaining the slides, and we will be sending those out. But now's a great chance if there's anything that you'd like to ask. And I was going to ask both Molly and Sarah, just if you could quickly each address optimally, what kind of lead time should someone expect or have in mind as they're looking at, changing their housing situation? So Molly, if I'm looking at, moving from my house and need to ready, my home for sale, including downsizing, and then, seek out an over 55 community, what do you advise in terms of how much time they might allow for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kelly. I think ideally, if you can start thinking about that a year or two in advance, that's the very ideal. I think the minimum is, if you've got a lot of stuff in your home and there's some significant things to be done, 6 months at the very minimum is probably a good option. And you also have to factor in finding the other place to live. So whether that's renting something, temporarily, or finding the next place to buy. So as much lead time as possible, for sure. But we can certainly scramble if we need to.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And Sarah, I'm sure you have a few words to say about sort of getting ahead of needing, long-term care services, again, for yourself or for a loved one. But and I should say, ideally, what would that look like for you?
Sure. Well, I think really the planning ahead is just to think about all of these options and to make sure that financially you're prepared for some of these various potential future states. However, in my world, we can mobilize really quickly, and we're used to it. We do it all the time. People are have an unexpected hospitalization or even a planned surgery. Maybe they are in acute rehab for a week, and we're able to get them set up with in-home care within 24 hours, even sometimes. Or if they don't quite know whether or not they're going to be ready to go home, then we can get them set up for a respite stay in an adult family home or assisted living community. So, and the great thing is that the communities and adult family homes in our areas, as well as the CCRCs, we're all part of a big network of resources, and we're all working together. And so those communities and homes are generally very well prepared to help move things along quickly if there is a more immediate need. And but that doesn't mean, I mean, I have clients I've been working with for a year who are still sort of poking around, figuring out where they'd like to be, want to tour a couple places this month and next month. And so it really varies a bit.
Yeah, I imagine it does. And so good to know that if someone is sort of in crisis, a decision has to be made quickly. It may not be the final decision, but that you've got a team of people ready to address that. So that's great. And both of you sound very flexible. So thank you. I am not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. So I'm imagining with all the information that we delivered, hopefully most people had their questions answered throughout the webinar. I will just wrap up by first thanking everyone who chose to spend this hour with Mollie, Sarah, and me. We know your time is valuable, and we truly appreciate that you've chosen to spend this period of time with us, learning about our areas of expertise in terms of housing, long-term care, and financial planning. We will send out separately in a separate email our PowerPoint presentation. So we will be sending that to all participants. Similarly, there's a recording. So we'll send a link to the recording when that's available in about a week or so. But again, we thank you all. You have our information, and feel free to reach out with any questions that you have for any of us individually. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and week. And thank you once again for joining.